Welcome to Talk to Me with Life Coach Natasha. My name is Natasha Sherman and I am your host. I think it could be said that as a species, primarily what we're after, besides survival and all that that implies, is simply being happy, being satisfied, being fulfilled. So then the question comes up, well, what is the source of happiness? Is it an outcome of circumstances? Can it be taught? Can it be learned? Can it be self-generated? Is there some key that will give us access to it on a consistent basis? For those of us living in the developed world, on a day-to-day basis, we have infinite numbers of choices, or so it seems, or access to infinite numbers of things. And yet, consistently, at the end of the day, for many of us, we're still left feeling somewhat hungry or unfulfilled. So if we posit that happiness is available to all of us at some level, perhaps the question isn't what would bring us happiness, but what is it that gets in the way of us having access to being happy, to being satisfied, to being fulfilled. So my guest today is Jim Roi. He is a philosopher and healer, and he's here to give us perhaps one of the possible answers to that question. He's here to talk about resentment as a spiritual disease. So welcome, Jim.
Hi, and I'm very happy to be here, very excited. I was really listening like, wow, that's very interesting what she's talking about.
So the question is, that comes up for me instantly is, there are all sorts of theories about what's going to bring happiness, what gets in the way. And here we have one simple word, resentment. Why resentment? And typically we don't think of resentment in the spiritual realm. So why resentment as spiritual dis-ease?
Yeah. Well, guys, so first let me say, I've spent my life dealing with spiritual disease. Dis-ease, that's all I mean, is something with which you're not at ease. So what I'm talking about shows up in your life, my life, like anything you keep doing that you're not at ease with, right? That you don't want to keep doing it. If you don't like the look of your image in the mirror or your paycheck, you're not at ease. If that keeps happening, I'm going to say that's symptomatic of what I call spiritual disease. And so when I pick resentment, it's like in the, I love the model of 12-step programs. So they made one for the alcoholics. It was, it could be repeated for every. So if it's food, money, sex, relationship, whatever you want, messy apartments. The source of all forms of spiritual dis-ease is resentment. That's what the AA literature says, the source.
So I'm going to interrupt you here for a second because you started out with, you look at your paycheck or you look at your image in the mirror, and typically we're led to think that we're unhappy strictly because of our circumstances, because of the way our body is, or because of the circumstance of the job that pays us that paycheck. And you're saying that that's not the source of it.
Absolutely. Change the job, even change the paycheck. You could even get a raise in very short order. It wouldn't be enough. You could change your location, change your partner, because all of that is like reflecting you, just as the mirror does.
Okay, so now we get to resentment as
Yeah.
That's quite a quantum leap, from, so how do we make that leap?
Okay, so first of all, if you could just get it, there's probably nothing more effective in dealing with spiritual disease than the 12-step program. So if you just take it, wow, this is what they say, right? So here's a good clue. Here's a good clue. So if I could get nothing more said than, this deserves our attention. Now, for me as a philosopher, when I started, and I've been working with addicts of all sorts, for the last 25 years, and today I would say if you're working with a human being, you're working with an addict of some sort.
Sure.
Myself, of course, excluded, whatever. But so when I heard this was fascinating to me, and with my background in philosophy, one of my favorite philosophers was Nietzsche, who is famous, well, not famous enough yet, but for saying mankind is the resentful being par excellence. And that his overman, his idea of like the next space that humanity can go to, is who we could be minus the dominance of resentment. So I'll give a quick what he says about it. Resentment is our way of dealing with pain. You know, we don't like pain. We don't like a world that necessitates pain. So rather than be with our pain, deal with it, we explain it. So if mommy hadn't this, and if you hadn't that, and if the boss hadn't that, and if, you know, the church hadn't, you know, if some...
So we're talking more like a spiritual malaise as opposed to...
Precisely.
Okay.
A sickness unto death, as my, you know, one of my favorite philosophers would call it. But literally, but here's the thing I want to get at, is that it is a way of being. See, it's not, it's exemplified, it's embodied in what we do. It's also embodied in our thinking, because we're not at ease in our own mind. We're not thinking our happy thoughts. We're imagining all kinds of outcomes. Like I have a dear friend who loved to speak of living in the ruins of the future. Now, we're free to think whatever we want, I guess, but it's really quite true. I've been interviewing lots and lots and lots of human beings, and we spend more time living in the ruins of the future rather than envisioning, imagining, creating what could be really possible.
Okay, so I have a question to ask you here. So let's get in some real examples, because I can hear people going, no, you know, my unhappiness is not about resentment. My unhappiness is I want that house and I can't have it, and I don't have enough money yet, and my unhappiness is because I have a baby and I can't stay home with my baby. I have to hold a job. So where does resentment come into that?
Yeah. So, like, I wouldn't attempt in like a short time here to convince anybody that what I'm saying is true.
No, but I want people to kind of hear for themselves.
Yeah. But I can say, like, the record, just take the example of alcoholics, right? They wouldn't say resentful. You know, the only reason I get mad sometimes, or the reason, everyone has reasons for whatever they do, for whatever they think. But, you know, in a rigorous program, when these people, you know, if they want to get sober, one of the first things they do is like, let's go over your history, let's list your resentments, right? And let's start cleaning this up. And let's start making amends, and let's start coming from the perspective that you are cause in these matters. You are responsible for what's been happening in your relationships, in your job, in your, you know, marriage, you know, wherever in your life. And it's stunning. All of a sudden, somebody who could swear on the Bible that they'd never drink again and then, you know, be drunk in 5 minutes later, all of a sudden they began to be able to do things that they'd never been able to do. And they began to have, as they say, a whole new attitude and outlook on life.
And you're suggesting that this comes out of looking and examining their resentments and owning them?
Oh, absolutely. And what I want to do is even like raise it up a little higher. I think we don't appreciate that. You know, even 12-steppers don't appreciate it well enough, how profound. So, like as Nietzsche would say, and I don't want to like make it a philosophical thing, but to get, this is our way of being. This isn't like some mistake one of us made.
So you're suggesting not that there's something wrong with us because we're resentful, and then we have to fix that.
Yeah.
You're saying that it comes with the human being.
Yeah, we're
human
resentful.
Being is resentful.
Yeah. So I'd rather just say, look, we're resentful. Let's like learn how to accept this and deal with this. There's nothing wrong. We're resentful, and our resentments, if we don't own them and become responsible for them, they ruin our lives.
How?
Well, because we live in the stories that we make up. So as Nietzsche says, you know, first of all, so we have a story that simply explains why we're suffering. So, you know, he says we tear open our oldest wounds. We bleed from long-healed scars. We make evildoers out of friends, wives, children, and whoever else stands closest to us. And the bottom line is, I suffer, someone must be to blame. So we live in this story about why I'm suffering.
Okay, so, you know, what I hear is resentment is past-based. It's something that lives in the past
It's a
that we're not.
sentiment of something that's already
Okay, so
happened.
we're reliving it, and keeping it alive and well.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you could say, okay, so what? So I'm resentful, and you're suggesting that there's some huge price we pay for that. So how does that show up?
So it closes down your possibilities. So you're in a world where people are out to get you. You're in a world where things don't turn out for you. You're in some kind of a storyline. That's why you keep having the pattern repeated and repeated and repeated.
So you're saying that resentment creates your worldview, yes?
Absolutely.
And then out of that...
It is your way of being, my way of being, our way of being, you know, and it is an explanation of why we're suffering. And we live in that story.
Okay.
So it's not like I'm suffering, which might be it's very interesting when you just suffer. I mean, really, it gets very interesting if you just suffer, but we don't just suffer. We explain it. I don't get mad, you make me mad. You know?
So we're always looking for someone to blame. We're looking
False
for the
cause.
reason.
Through and through, all from the beginning. And it's just, we're all doing it, so it's kind of hard to notice, you know. If
Yeah,
you point your
sure.
finger at it, it's like, what are you talking about? And everybody's got reasons in their minds. See, our minds are run by our resentments. We gather evidence. Why do you remember what you remember? Well, you know, there's a number of reasons, but one thing you notice, you remember things that make you right in your story about why you're not successful, you know, why this doesn't work, why that didn't turn out.
Wow. It's really interesting.
Yes.
So it's like
that's wonderful. If we can just get
So we
people
keep the
interested.
storyline going, and then it kind of explains away why our life is the way it is, and then what does that let us off the hook for?
Yeah. So now we got an explanation, which seems to be awfully important to us. We've got a good explanation. We can prove why things aren't working, you know, which that's worth a lot. The trap, though, is that we don't notice is as much as these stories explain everything, and each one of us could win our case in court, we've got good evidence, it just doesn't free us. Whereas owning the resentment...
Say a little bit more about that.
Well, sure. But everyone's got a story. Everyone's got a great story about why they're not fulfilled, why they haven't accomplished all they should have been. Every one of us could have been a contender. Okay? So we got these great stories, you know, and they really are. They're wonderful stories. And we keep doing the same thing. So I'm kind of saying a resentment's always kind of a lie, you know. It's not the truth because the truth would free us. So these stories don't free us. My father this and my...
Okay, so but then as human beings, we do things that serve us, okay? There's some juice we get out of it. So what's the juice that we get out of holding on to the story of resentment or whatever it is we resent?
Well, I think the best way you could say that, and we don't like to think that this is what we're really up to, but we got to be right. We love to be right. You know, we're right. Here's our story, here's our evidence. You draw the conclusion. So we get to be right. We're really, 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 really right.
And you're saying that's enough, that's a prime motivator for us as human beings?
Yeah, and I would say also we get to preserve the delusion of a pain-free world.
How so?
Yeah, because if Daddy hadn't this and you hadn't that, I wouldn't be suffering.
Okay, so that somehow there is a pain-free world that we just don't have access to.
No,
but
no,
all these...
no. I stay with the Buddha. This is the place where you suffer. But we preserve the story, the hope, the fantasy of a pain-free world. In fact, pain is probably the most mystical, wonderful thing in the world. In the 12 steps, and not only there, you know, they say pain is the touchstone of all spiritual growth. But we don't like to touch the stone, you know? We don't like that.
So, okay, so I'm going to, you know, play devil's advocate here. So on the one hand, there are people, who don't have spiritual belief systems, okay? Or what we would typically identify as spiritual belief systems. So, you know, I'm here, I live my life, I die. So, you know, how do you address that? But the other thing is, you know, you could posit that that whole thing about life is suffering is also something that lets you off the hook, because, oh, okay, life is suffering. And then the next question would be, well, who said?
But look, so I'm not going to try and resolve everything. And
No, we're not into resolving.
No, but the questions are great. So just stay with the thing of like, wait, how did you put it first? See, I don't personally care. Like I say, there's not a one of us. If you're believing something, that's spirit at work. So, you know, that's what the opportunity of resentment and compulsive behavior and addiction is. I think some people are, you know, thrilled about the possibility of a God or whatever, right? And they're going to find out about it all on their own probably, or they're going to go. But you know what? Most folks aren't going to do that because they don't really care about that. And I don't think that's wrong, but they care about their money, and they care about their job, and they care about their relationship, and they care about their kids, and they care about where their life isn't working. They care about their dis-ease. So we have a huge opportunity here to break through, because as the future comes upon us with more and more urgency, and our finances, I mean, we can act out today in more ways than we ever could before. So the old natural, either, you know, you couldn't eat enough food to get fat or spend enough money to go broke. Now you can you can exceed in every way imaginable. So we need a new kind of governance. So to see, I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but I'm saying if you begin to realize that the way you're going about this is kind of going around and around and around, here's an area, your compulsive behaviors, the things you keep doing, and naturally you think it's not you, or you think you can change them, you know, but here's an area where you can actually begin inquiring about things you care about, and to find there, in the places we care so much, that an application of a spiritual discipline makes a difference. And it's not some years and years on the mountaintop. So mainly, initially, I'm just trying to say to folks, look, here's an arena, here's a place that has really kind of escaped our notice. And even to the extent that we investigate it, it's deeply underappreciated. So, I mean, I think it's, you know, like I'm talking about resentment, despair, addiction, but it's very exciting. See, I'd say it's the biggest opportunity that we have. This is...
So I want to talk about that
Good.
again. I want to get back to that whole thing as suffering as opportunity. You know, I can hold that point of view until I'm suffering a little too much, or until I'm a little too uncomfortable, and then I go, oh, who needs it? And who said that in the first place? You know, what I'm trying to inquire into, because this is not about convincing anybody of anything, so someone is at dis-ease with certain areas of their lives. What would you say to them? I mean, you know, where do I look? And then, okay, so let's say I'm willing to take a look at my resentments. Then what?
Okay, but what I would say first is let's just start talking about how, see, you're not at ease. That's what you're really interested in. So let's use your dis-ease, and let's kind of use that to build a model of how we work. So you're not at ease physically, you're not at ease in your mind, and I'm going to say you're not at ease spiritually, but we don't even know about the spirit thing. It's not something we think. But by following your dis-ease, that's what my work is very much about. Is like, just by taking the dis-ease, we can open up a perspective on ourselves.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you, because you know, on the one hand, you know, we throw people ideas, but then how do you apply it? How does it actually work in my life? So let's say someone has an eating disorder, okay? Overeat or anorexic or whatever, some eating disorder, some addictive behavior of some sort. So you have them examine their resentments, and then they get that, okay, they see some things that they're resenting. How does that translate into some kind of transformation or some kind of easing of the dis-ease?
Okay, so again, I'm going to say this isn't about something you're resenting, though there is a story and there are certain events that you've made certain decisions about. But the point is that this resentment is more than something, and it's more than something that happened. It's a way that you're being right now. And this is new territory for us. We're not used to investigating our...
So in other words, you're suggesting that as human beings, we are being resentful.
Absolutely.
As just a generic way of being.
As my friend Nietzsche said, mankind is the resentful being, par excellence. This is our way of being. And we're trying to improve our behavior. We're trying to lose some weight. And this investigation transforms the way we see our physical reality, the way we see our mental reality, and fundamentally the way we are, the way, and that I could say spirit, but it's not important. You could use a number of words.
Okay, so, we've all had those experiences where, we take a look at something and something transforms. At a very practical level, someone sitting out there listening says, well, what is it exactly I should be thinking about? Where should I be looking? And what questions would I ask myself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I like the 12-step model, because it's down home, it's available, and it's affordable. So take your thing there, right? Because you got a community of people that'll be very happy to actually...
So I could walk into any 12-step room of any...
Well, pick one that fits your symptoms. So if it's food, there's a number of food programs. If it's relationships, there's a number of relationship programs. If it's sex, there's a number of sex. Money, there's something that'll deal with your symptom, which is very, very important. Because, see, that's where we all care about something concrete. Okay? And then we apply a spiritual discipline to it. And there's a real education that goes on, but there's a body of folks who are engaged in the same education, and there are a set of practices that you can, utilize on a daily basis. And if you utilize them, and listen, just because it's not easy to utilize them. It's a genuine, it's an accomplishment. But here's the thing. You're not going to get less and less diseased. It's a progressive disease. So, you can get more and more, I can put up with this 5 pounds, and then I can put up with this 10 pounds, and then I don't even notice this 20 pounds, and I'm dead. And I don't even know that I'm dead, and everybody else is dead too, so we don't even notice that each other's dead, because we're all here in the same deadness. And, so I say, we need something. I'd say one of my guiding visions now is this planet, this species, either we're going to wake up much more quickly and much more profoundly and much more communally than we ever imagined, or it's like game over, man.
Okay, so let's translate that back to something like a 12-step program.
Yeah.
Okay, so typically I imagine that people, when they hear 12-step program, immediately think of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, but the AA and NA are the two most common. And then there's this, that's for people who are effed up, That's not for me. Those are not my problems.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be identified with that.
This is great, because that's exactly the point. See, you begin to win by just walking in the door, because that which doesn't want to be effed up is yourself. So this thing gives us, resentment is just one thread. Another one is this self, see? When they'll say this self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. So you get to examine this self, which is, it doesn't want to admit anything. So the opening is, we admitted we were powerless over X. So you've begun to win just by admitting. You've begun to say something you haven't been saying.
Okay, so I have a question about that, because that's great. That first step of admitting we're powerless over our acts. Do you know how we don't want to, oh my God, we so don't want to admit we're powerless, because what would that make us? So how can you wrap yourself around that, like admitting you're powerless? Are we powerless?
Yeah. So I'll just say it like this. Either something quite unprecedented is going to be happening, which might be that we really begin to get that this delusion that we have power, is kind of like we begin to get freed from it. Because we are, as in the AA literature would say, we are victims of the delusion that we can wrest satisfaction and happiness from this world if only we manage well. And we're dying. We're not, I know, but we all believe it fervently.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just
even when we don't, we still do.
Right? Even when we see through it, we still do. we need to begin talking about that, compassionately and prodigiously, lots, and supporting each other in a kind of a conversation.
See, here's the thing. Here's where I go with that sometimes, is to me, because it's so easy to dance around, so I say, okay, so I'm powerless, and giving up the delusion of it'll all be wonderful someday if I only, and it's the if only conversation. And I can really get that and go, yeah, huh. And then the other piece goes, yeah, well, that's a way of giving up. Who said you can't have it all? And, that's just a way of throwing in the towel. So, how do you extract yourself from that one?
Well, I wouldn't even try to extract myself. I'd say, okay, how's that working for you? Because Dr. Phil would say, we're all holding out. Fine, hold out all you want. But when you've had enough, and you see that the suffering isn't diminishing, and you might just hear a voice saying, maybe you really don't have the power that you think. And maybe that's the truth that has the power to free. So, it really is something to overcome. It really is something to overcome. This thing of being powerful, powerless, it really is at the heart of the matter.
It's a very, it creates a very powerful reaction. It's a very reactive word to say powerless.
Yeah.
Who wants to claim to be powerless?
Right?
How do I then be empowered if I'm powerless?
Right. Yeah. What if we all could get, so we're all trying to power through the world, and we're going to make the world safe for democracy, and we're going to take democracy to the third world, whatever the heck we think, and we're all exerting our power and asserting our power, and we're dying.
And how's it working out?
Yeah, how's it working out for us?
Yeah.
So
I have to interrupt you here for a second because I'm being told that we have 2 minutes, believe it or not. So I really want to give you the opportunity to say, whatever it is that you would like to say in 2 minutes, what people should be exploring, looking at, what would be useful.
Well, one thing I'd say, it's a hard area to investigate. It's not, it's not a simple thing. We'll run down to your local 12-step meeting or whatever. But if you just start looking into yourself and just start saying, maybe our model is really blinding us. And maybe much more is possible than we've imagined. But it's that saying from Marianne Williamson, it's really not our pettiness and our smallness that scares us, it's our hugeness. So I'm saying, here's this point. If we could accept being powerless, we might get access to power beyond imagining. And we're all going to have to start risking something, but the way we've been going at it, this individuated, competitive, one-up, we got to start learning to work together. We got to start learning to look out for each other.
Thank you so much. My name is Natasha Sherman, and this has been Talk to Me. Thank you for joining us.